Welcome to Horror Shuffle.
Hey, this is Ryan. This is going to be a special bonus episode of the Horror Shuffle podcast for people who love horror movies like myself. But yeah, being Friday the 13th today, I thought I'd record just a little special Friday the 13th related episode. Since Friday the 13th, I would say, is my favorite horror franchise. I love Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but Friday the 13th has always just been, I don't know, a special group of movies for me, especially the first four. I loved whenever they were shown on TV, and it seems like the Friday the 13th movies were shown much more than any of the other movies. I suppose Halloween was pretty much just around Halloween. Nightmare on Elm Street, I really, I don't even know if they were hardly ever on TV because my grandma's house is where I would watch movies on cable because we didn't have cable where I lived growing up. And I can't recall ever watching a Nightmare on Elm Street movie at my grandma's house. I'm sure I did, but I don't know. I don't recall. But definitely Friday the 13th, that was always on, especially if there happened to be, a Friday the 13th. They would often show them on USA or TBS, WGN, or maybe it was just USA even, I'm not sure. And then once in a while, we would get like a free preview weekend of like Cinemax or HBO. And of course, sometimes the Friday the 13th movies would be on there. So that was always fun. And like I remember my cousin Dale at my grandma's, we would watch. And I remember one time, I think we were watching a Friday the 13th movie, and all of a sudden my cousin Dale just bolted up and ran out the front door. And so I like immediately like chased him and like, oh, this is where like he wants me to chase him. I don't know how old I was, probably maybe around 9 or 10 or so, 11, maybe even younger, I'm not sure. But anyway, I ran out the door after him, and I saw him like way ahead of me because he was much taller and a little bit older and faster. And he ran down to my grandma's barn, and it was dark outside. And so I was a little scared, of course, and I followed him, but I kind of took my time because I knew he was up to something. So I get into the barn, and I can hear him going, kee, 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 ma, ma, ma. Well, no, that's not true. Like everybody, we thought it was ch, 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 ha, ha, ha. But I couldn't see him. I didn't know where he was. And so I was just looking for him in the barn, and all of a sudden, he jumps down from the rafters. I think he was wearing a pillowcase over his head, like Jason in part two. Well, not that it's. I think it's a flour sack, but yeah, he was wearing a pillowcase, and he was holding an axe, and he chased me up my grandma's yard with an axe. And of course, I knew it was him, but I still ran like as if my life depended on it. And yeah, I just always remember that. He basically dressed up as Jason, and yeah, so that was definitely a lot of fun. Another thing, when it was shown on TV, for some reason, and I could be wrong, but it seemed like they would mostly show part one and two, but then sometimes you'd have part one, part two, and three, and then it would jump to part five. Like it would skip part four for some reason. And I never really understood it. Maybe it's because of Jason's death at the end. I guess that was hard to show. I don't know. But part five has so much nudity in it. So, yeah, I don't know. But I guess they just cut around that. It was easier to cut around that than uh, completely cutting Jason's death at the end of part four. That had to have been the reason. But yeah, part two is the one I remember watching most on cable, and I loved the end when Jason jumps through the window. I just waited for that part, and like if someone was around who I thought hadn't seen it, I was like, oh, they're in for a treat. And usually they weren't quite as thrilled with it as I would hope they would be. Like I remember watching it with my grandma, and I mean, she was like, "Ooh," and she's spooky. She would always say that, like her reaction to like somebody getting their head cut off. Ooh, spooky, as if seeing like a ghost on Scooby Doo or something. That might be my favorite look of Jason in part two when he jumps through the window. And I've always thought it was funny because that Jason at the end of part two, that's the Jason that has the most hair. And I always thought it was funny that the guy playing him in that scene, his last name is Gillette, and he had the most hair. It, it's kind of similar to how the one member of ZZ Top who doesn't have a beard is named Frank Beard. I think I mentioned in previous episodes that we used to rent movies and we had two VCRs, so we would like record them. So we had tons of recordable VHS tapes full of movies, and one of them had the first four Friday the 13th movies on it. And I think, and I still have that VHS tape. I need to pop it in someday because I think at the end of the final chapter, after that is over, I made a compilation of all of Jason's injuries from like obviously part two until Jason Goes to Hell, because that was what had just come out at that point. So yeah, it took every injury Jason gets in movies. I made like a compilation of it, and so it ends with him being dragged underground into hell at the end of I almost said Freddy's Dead, at the end of Jason Goes to Hell. But yeah, that was I used to watch sometimes. If instead of watching the movies, I would just watch that, so that it was kind of like a blitz version of watching the movies, or well, just a compilation. But yeah, well, actually, no, it probably isn't on that tape. I wonder, I don't know what tape that was on. I think it was at the end of some other, like maybe the Beverly Hills Cop VHS tape, which I have. I also have that. I need to try to find that. I'll have to go through them sometime. Another thing I remember doing, I think I was in high school, maybe eighth grade. I made like a Friday the 13th board game just on like a piece of cardboard. I drew Crystal Lake and a bunch of cabins, and I made like trails from different cabins and around the lake, and like I think I had the Jarvis house and different things. And so it was kind of similar to the map in the Friday the 13th game that you can play like on Xbox, and I'll get to that in a little bit too, and also the NES version. But yeah, the board game, I would play it just by myself, and I don't even remember exactly how it worked, but I remember I used dice, and I drew like a diagram of Jason on an index card, and I sectioned it off into like areas where I would roll a four-sided die, and so to see where, if a counselor attacked Jason, where he hit him and what area. But then I would have it in like it was almost like I think I drew it like, funny I didn't use graph paper because I know I had it, but I drew like lines going down. So then I would roll maybe a 6 or 8 sided die, and whatever number I rolled, that is where the counselor hit Jason. So sometimes it would completely miss him, or hit him in the head, or like leg or whatever. And then I also drew his face, but then I made a mask and I put it on the face so that his mask could get knocked off, just like in the movies. But yeah, so I would play that by myself usually, and I actually have the intention of making an updated version of that. I bought one of those like trifold foam cardboard thingies, the kind of thing you see at like a school science fair where like some kid will make like examples of erosion or something and showing pictures of like a shoreline or whatever. But I have one of those, and I want to draw like Crystal Lake and a bunch of cabins and stuff on it. But yeah, I've that's been on the back burner for a number of years now. I can see that bloody thing from where I'm sitting here, pretty kind of sticking out of the wall or near the wall. But yeah, then the Friday the 13th NES game, of course, was a big hit in our household, and my mom was the best at that game. She was the first one to actually beat it, which was really cool. I remember just sitting on the couch and watching her, and also she was the first one to find Jason's mother's the cave Jason's mother's head is in and get the sweater. Which, by the way, that did that sweater really help or do anything? It didn't seem to make any bit of difference. I don't know. I used to think maybe our game was malfunctioned or something, because I it almost seemed like it made it worse when you were wearing it. I don't know. It was probably all in my head. But yeah, that was a lot of fun playing that game. And then, of course, I have an Xbox, so I play the Friday the 13th game on there. And sadly, I guess in a couple of months or a few months, it's no longer going to be playable as far as playing it with people online, unless maybe you can do private groups. I'm not sure. I hope you can still play the offline game, because I really enjoy playing that. Even though I kind of, it's definitely not as good as playing with people, but well, anybody who plays the game knows that. But I still have fun playing the offline mode. If you can play like with a private group, like invite people, one day I would like to like kind of make like almost a script and have people play like certain parts and like create like a movie in the game where a counselor will, or they're not, I don't know if they're counselors in the game really, but just people, and they could, I don't know, go down by the lake or something, and yeah, like there would be an established final person, and like no stupid dancing or teabagging or any of that bullshit or running people over. That is really irritating in the game. I get it. It's, it might be, I can see where you're just like, fuck these people taking this game so seriously, but I don't know. It's still, I think it's stupid, but the game, yeah, I don't know. It's a fun game, and it sucks that it's didn't end up being what it really should have been, and hopefully they can make a new one someday. Yeah. Another thing I want to talk about a little bit is the score for the movies by Harry Manfredini. I listen to this music on my Spotify play. I have it on not every track from every like soundtrack, but on my Halloween Spotify playlist, I have all of them, and I will often listen to that just when I'm charting at work or just around the house, and like often when I'm in the shower, because there are so many tracks that they'll come on, and I don't know if my neighbors can hear, like, what the hell is that lunatic listening to? And then at work, I will often start whistling the theme from the part 5, kind of the, you know how it goes like, and also part 7, the kind of like when Tina is using her powers. I think that's when that music usually comes on. But I whistle that so often at work, and I've had people be like, "Oh, you're in a happy mood," or asking like what I'm whistling, and it's always funny to be like, "Oh, actually, it's the one part of the theme from Friday the 13th, Part 7." But yeah, the music is just great, and I think severely underrated. I know I've brought it up to people when talking about soundtracks to horror, and I get the feeling that people just don't really appreciate it. They're like, "Oh, I don't know, that's kind of run of the mill." And then I know people compare it to Bernard Herrmann's score from Psycho and other things, but yeah, I don't know. I just it really makes the movie for me. So yeah, nothing earth shattering in this episode or anything, but I just thought it's Friday the 13th, and I don't know that I'll get to watch any of them today because I have to work both my jobs today. But I was kind of looking at my Friday the 13th. I have a book that my cousin Dale, who I mentioned before, gave to me. It's Making Friday the 13th by David Grove. It's the legend of Camp Blood. And yeah, it just goes through all of the movies and the making of them and stories from it. And there's a bunch of pictures in it. And yeah, it's a really cool book. So I might kind of look through that at in between jobs tomorrow or something, just to celebrate. And I have to decide which of my Friday the 13th shirts I want to wear because I now have 3 of them because I did order one with Crazy Ralph, and then I have another one that it's kind of just has, it says Camp Crystal Lake and No Place to Hide, and Jason's on there. And my friend Imelda gave me for my birthday Friday the 13th, the final chapter shirt with Crispin Glover dancing, and that is my favorite of the 3. So I think that is probably what I will wear to work because it's Friday the 13th, and even though I work in a nursing home, I wouldn't wear a shirt with Jason on it or anything with like blood or anything like that. But yeah, I think that it's just Crispin Glover dancing. And I mean, it says Friday the 13th on it, but it is going to be Friday the 13th, so I think that'll be okay. So, yes, happy Friday the 13th, and come back for my next episode, which will be on John Carpenter's Vampires. I'll be right back. Who's the baddest country bumpkin deputy out in the sticks? Dorf! You're damn right. Who is the man who knows all the slang for marijuana? Dorf!
Colombian Goldman, brass, hash, Louise,
They say this cat Dorf is a bad motorbiker.
another word out of you, understand?
But I'm talking about Dorf.